Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another show of Marijuana Resolve. Today we have a very special guest. I'm going to turn it over to Vida so he can introduce our guest. We're very excited about this. We hope you all enjoy our show. And Vida, why don't you introduce who we have on today and get us started here.
Okay, we're here at the BCTV studios in downtown Brattleboro, and we do have a special guest with us today. The Marijuana Resolve show is about past personal use of marijuana, and our interest in discussing this topic with our fellow Americans is in fact to show people that we have a human face to show you that we're people. Many of us are hard-working, tax-paying, family people, and we really just simply want to make it clear to you that we want you to treat us like humans. And so for our really first outreach to someone who has been actively working in this movement for a long time, we have with us today Russ Belville from NORML. And NORML, as most of you should know, is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Welcome, Russ. And you're now about to speak to Vermont, and who knows where else.
Well, hello, Vermont, and may I thank you for the excellent maple syrup.
You're very welcome. Hey, I'm going to send you a batch of apples from a friend of mine who is one of the best apple guys. You have never had an apple like these guys.
I'm willing to try it.
We'll send them to you. We'll get some contact information later, Russ.
Now, okay. Russ, you're the National Outreach Coordinator for NORML. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do for the organization?
Well, it has both an internal and an external component. Internally, I'm in charge of organizing the 155 state and local and international chapters of NORML that we have. So I help coordinate, for example, if we had a couple of touring bands that came through and they wanted to have information on marijuana legalization at their concerts, so I help coordinate that with the local chapters, get them to show up and so forth. So there's a lot of that internal work that's involved with it. Externally, my job as outreach coordinator is to show people the face of NORML and to give them the latest news and information that affects the cannabis community. And we do that on our talk radio show, NORML Show Live, at live.norml.org every weekday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. So I think of it as being the the talk radio for the tokers out there, to let folks know that our subject is just as important as any others. If there's networks out there for every different activity that people are involved in, cannabis deserves its own network as well, and I'm happy to be able to reach out to people that way.
Wow.
Let's
I like that.
and which is really an important part of that whole superstructure of getting the word out and identifying what we do and why we do it. And why don't you give our viewers just maybe a brief background about NORML, when it came into existence. Some of these things, of course, people will know, but I think it wouldn't hurt to just have our viewers hear it from you.
Okay, well, NORML, of course, is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, and it developed early in the 1970s. There were other organizations that came before. Amorphia is one that comes to mind, but really NORML was the first to found itself as a nonprofit. The organization began in 1970, but officially became incorporated as a nonprofit in 1971. So it's 40 or 41 years, depending on how you look at it, that NORML's been in existence. During that time, in the early 1970s, we were shepherding up to 11 states getting decriminalization. Before NORML existed, all states treated possession as a felony offense, and now only 2 states do that, Arizona and Florida. And we helped through the 1970s get the decriminalization movement happening. Throughout the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s, we were involved in numerous lawsuits against the Drug Enforcement Administration and other government organizations for the rescheduling of cannabis to better fit with its actual scientific truth about what the plant is. And since the 1990s, we've been involved on the local level helping to gain support for various medical marijuana and decriminalization initiatives out there. In our 41st year, we're looking forward to bringing more decriminalization, medical marijuana, and hopefully legalization in at least 4 or 5 states come 2012.
Excellent.
Could you identify those states for us?
Sure. The current states that are looking to have initiatives to legalize marijuana are California, Oregon, Washington, and Colorado. Now, of course, there are only 26 states in the United States that allow for the initiative process where citizens can directly help create laws. But there are also states in the New England area, Massachusetts and New Hampshire most recently, that have been submitting bills to legalize marijuana to some degree. I believe Maine also had a bill to legalize. The Maine and New Hampshire bills, I think, are dead in their legislatures right now. But the fact that we're even bringing this up, that legalization is even a legitimate topic for usually staid conservative legislators, is definitely progress.
Is that true for Rhode Island also, I believe? I think they're may be involved in that. They do have other initiatives, decrim for sure. And
Yeah,
I think it's a
I think you're right. And I also think Massachusetts is the one of the few New England states that has the initiative process. I think Maine has it as well, but I think Massachusetts will be trying an initiative as well.
So, Daryl, you said what we do.
We do not. I know Vermont does not, because
Right.
it's been brought up before, and the chair of the Senate GovOps committee does not want that. Russ, what I'd like to just briefly talk about a little bit is one of the reasons why I think it's going to happen. As a former representative in Vermont up at the State House here, I see the major obstacles to our to the budget, okay? And my theory now is I think a lot of them conservative folks are seeing the same problems with the budgets, and I see this as a way to finally decrim or make it legalize marijuana and let us smoke it comfortably at home without any worries and tax us. Most people don't care, and we can really start taking care of a lot of the budget problems that these states are having, and I would say most of the folks are more than willing to pay that tax. They'd rather do that than have to worry about spending time in prison.
Well, absolutely, and it's becoming obvious to state legislators that we cannot afford the luxury of locking up and warehousing potheads anymore. It's just, regardless of what you think about marijuana smoking, whether you like or dislike the people that are using marijuana for whatever moral or whatever reasons you may come up with, it's simply something we cannot afford to do anymore. We cannot afford it. And we're also, it's something that my friend Vivian McPeak, who runs the Seattle Hemp Fest, kind of laments. He says it's a shame that people wouldn't come around to legalization because of the human rights issues, because of the civil rights issues involved, the racial justice issues involved. But hey, if it's making a buck that brings them around, great. Whatever it is that stops locking people in a cage for the personal use of a plant.
It is true, by the way, that it is a human rights issue,
Yeah.
and that the marijuana people are really lagging in that respect. We don't have the oomph that the black causes had in this country for civil rights. The gay people fought back. And to this day, their human rights are fairly secure. But marijuana people have never really taken it in that direction. And I've often wondered about that also. How would we take it in a direction of human rights in terms of adding that to the pot, so to speak?
Well, the important thing is for marijuana reformers to not be ashamed of being marijuana reformers and to understand how important the issue truly is. I would note some differences, in the gay rights movement up, recently the Lawrence v. Texas decision that decriminalized sodomy on a federal level. But after that, there's really not a crime in being gay. You can't be arrested. You can't have your door knocked down and taken away for being gay. The same thing exists for African American people in the society, at least these days, is that it's not a crime to be black, but it is still a crime to be a marijuana user. It's a crime to grow it, it's a crime to possess it, it's a crime to use it, whether you're doing that for medical reasons, spiritual reasons, or just because you're bored on a Friday night. So that presents a barrier to getting a lot of people involved in the marijuana movement, is the fact that doing so can cost you your job, cost you your child custody, cost you your scholarships. There's all sorts of repercussions to coming out as a marijuana reformer. And I've always kind of pointed out that in this issue, we're kind of like an iceberg, where at the tip of the iceberg, you see the people who can come out to the marches, usually the people with not a whole lot to lose. We'll say, tie-dyes and piercings and tattoos and so what people would characterize as a fringe. And again, Nothing wrong with that. They're the people who can afford to be out there and be seen. But below the surface is this great mass of average, regular cannabis consumers who are moms and dads and barbers and teachers and cops and firemen and just regular people who can't come out. And so the movement gets characterized as being this fringe, silly thing because only the people that can come out for it tend to be the fringe, silly people. And that's, I think, the biggest thing we need to do, and I'm glad we're doing this on this show, is to present that there are mainstream voices out there, there are regular people out there that are using cannabis, and there's nothing to be ashamed about in protesting this insane prohibition of it.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I got involved, Russ, is I was a state rep. I was on the town select board. I have a family. As you can see, I cut my hair. When we put this show out, most people think Vida is the guy. Okay, and I got to tell them, no, it's me, man, it's me. But that's the first impression type of thing. And so how me and Vida hooked up was he saw me when I was running for a smaller office of the select board in town. I knew the issue didn't matter, but I wanted the folks that I trust and who trust me know what I was really all about. Okay, I was sick of hiding out and stuff like that. So I decided to start talking about this, and Vida saw that and said, hey man, we got to do something. And because I believe in it so much,
yeah, Daryl was holding a legalized marijuana sign that made it into our paper.
And it was just so I could get feedback on the folks around here to see if they'd all of a sudden say, okay, Daryl, you're done. We don't care about it. It did not happen that way.
And he got elected with
a huge amount of votes.
Right,
and
exactly.
You know what happened, Russ? Was walking around now, the people that won't come out to those things, the people that are worried about their way of life are tapping me on the back saying, thank you, keep going. They won't come out yet, but they're getting closer. So that's what we're just trying to do, and it takes us all to do that, and we can't be afraid anymore of it. This is ridiculous.
Well, it's amazing what 70-plus years of propaganda against cannabis can do to even us, the people who support cannabis law reform. There's an interesting poll that happened in Minnesota when they were trying to pass medical marijuana, and I think this was in 2007. I could be wrong on the date, but it's recent. And the poll asked people, do you support medical marijuana? And it came back about 3 out of 4 people said, yes, I support medical marijuana. And then they asked, do you think your neighbor supports medical marijuana? And about 3 out of 4 people said, no, I don't think my neighbor supports it. So the propaganda is so strong that half of us have been convinced that we're not on our own side. It's just really amazing.
That's a very good point and true. True.
Well, it's that which is one of the reasons why when Daryl and I first got together here was in fact to try to bridge that gap and create a dialogue in this state and go as public as we are with it with the Marijuana Resolve show.
People see the human face behind it, that we're not sitting someplace hidden away. I'm very active in the community, and I've done a lot of things. So, I'm not one of them people that's just smoking a little herb in the basement and waiting for the cocoon, to come around me. I am actually out there doing things, and to be honest with you, that's what helps me do the stuff that I do. Okay? Yeah. Because I did the medical prescribed stuff, and there were so many side effects to that I had to stop. So I got my own reasons for doing what I do too, and I am talking about it now, and let the cards fall where they may. My family supports me, and a lot of my good friends support me. My community's been fairly behind me, so this is what I chose to do. I got out of the legislature to kind of focus on this now. I might have been a little better off still being in, but it was really bugging me when we go out to talk about this issue with my fellow representatives. And we'd be in a bar, and I'm a non-drinker. And then we'd leave the bar after about 3 or 4 hours. Now, who do you think was breaking the law then, Russ?
Yeah.
And these were the guys making the laws. So
exactly.
That right there was driving me nuts. And I could see that we weren't going to get very far, so I wanted to go out on my own and try and see what I could do this way and use some of my contacts. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it so that really, for me personally, I think it would help the country and a whole lot of people. And our prison system in the state of Vermont, when I first got on, Russ, our corrections budget was $42 million. That was in 2000. When I left, we were at it was $54 million, I'm sorry. We were at $140 million 8 years later when I left. 50% of that was due for drugs. And out of that, 75% of that was marijuana, which was absolutely incredible. And then I have children who were starting to get ready to go to college and stuff. I found out that if you had a marijuana conviction, you probably were going to lose all your scholarships. So I was like, man, now we're even attacking our youth, which I knew we were doing anyway. But it was just it's just ridiculous to me. So
and this country, as you know, incarcerates more of its young people than any other country on the planet.
It's absolutely incredible.
Well, that fits along with our general statistics consideration. We're making 1.6 million drug arrests every year in this country, and 858,000 of those are for marijuana. So marijuana makes up 52% of all drug arrests in this country, and all marijuana arrests, 88% of those are just for possession. This has led to the United States having 2.3 million people behind bars, which represents 23% of all the prisoners on the planet. We have more people in our jails than does communist China, a nation with 1.6 billion people. They only imprison 16% of the world's imprisoned. And when we look at the race of that population, that prison population, that's where you see the real insanity of this drug war. In America right now, 2 out of 3 people are white. In marijuana use, 70% of the people that use marijuana are white. Yet people doing time for drugs, 45% of them are black, 19% are Hispanic. As I like to put it, 2 out of 3 people in America are white, but 2 out of 3 people doing time are not.
Yeah, no, there's a good statistic for you right there.
Well, that makes me feel better that Daryl and I have decided to kind of launch this Vermont initiative here, because we felt that we were lacking in that kind of an outreach to the community. And Russ is tangled up in wires there. I can't say.
No, nobody knows that. Nobody knows that.
My assistant isn't here today. What do you know?
So when Daryl and I first sat down, the first thing we had to do was to assess what was around us. And of course, we know Normal from way back. Many people know about the Marijuana Policy Project. You have a host of other organizations around the country. And as I mentioned to you briefly on the phone last week when we talked, that we don't have enough of a center force here, that we're splintered into different groups. And I had said to Russ that it's a shame that we all didn't get behind Normal and stay there so many years ago, because I think we would have been ahead of this now had we provided a unified front. The way the civil rights people did, the way the gay people did. Again, one of our faults, I believe, in marijuana reform is that we're not really unified, and that's not very helpful to the cause. So in order to do that, what helps to unify people? Take the dehumanization and put a face on it.
Well, as far as the different groups being out there, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I wish at times we were better coordinated, but I like to try to think of it as the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. You know, they have their own squabbles between each other, they have their little rivalries, but they're really all on the same side. The difference is, how do you want to fight the battle? Well, in the Army, you're going to do it on land and with guns, and in the Navy, you're going to do it with ships, and the Air Force, you're going to do it with planes. And I think of that with Normal, MPP, ASA, all these other groups the same way. In the early 70s, it was really easy for there to be one group, because really there was just one point: don't lock us up for pot. But as times have changed, there's now many different areas. There's now a National Cannabis Industries Association for the business of marijuana. There's MPP for the policy of marijuana. There's Americans for Safe Access just for medical marijuana. There's Hemp Industries Association just for hemp. So I see it more as evidence of how our movement has grown and blossomed, and now that there are so many other niches to fill, there are organizations to fill those niches. That said, it would be nice to have a little more cohesion sometimes, but this is happening too. Most recently, Keith Stropp, our founder, has been working with, I believe it was Steve Fox from MPP, Aaron Houston from Students from Sensible Drug Policy, and another person whose name escapes me, but 4 different groups, somebody from Drug Policy Alliance, I believe, coming together to work with Representative Jared Polis and Representative Barney Frank for a new federal legalization measure to be proposed. So this action is happening, and I think people do realize there needs to be more coalition building, and that is coming together better than it has in the past, I think.
Well, that's really encouraging to hear. Keith is great. I've talked to Keith a number of times. He's a solid human being and really put out for us. John Getman is another one.
Yes.
Who was just terrific with the data and the information. Invaluable data comes from that man, and it's really great that well, you know what, we'll think of ourselves as a part of that. Not as a separate entity, and
No.
that we're really glad to to work with Normal any way that we can.
Oh yeah, we do. We did Marijuana Resolve. First off, it took us a little while to get the name. We love the name, Marijuana Resolve. It's time to resolve this whole issue. But we don't really have much of a normal presence right here in the state of Vermont, even.
Right.
So we had to do something. We didn't want to jump off of on your guys. So we'd be more than happy to do whatever.
And MPP is largely a lobbyist group here, not. And what Daryl and I did was take this issue to the people. We went out on the streets to talk to people, to hand out our decrim event cards.
A couple forums.
We set up forums, and so we're trying to get as public with it as we can. And as part of that, we want to continue the process of talking about people's personal use of marijuana. We do ask them to talk about the past, but if someone wants to talk about what they're doing now, that's fine. So it would be safe to assume then that you yourself is someone who is obviously smoked marijuana.
Yes, sir.
and that why don't we just start talking about some of your experiences and what you could take it from how old were you when you started, for instance, first impressions, anything. You want to cover some of that territory?
Sure, and I think it's really important too, because the big barrier that we have, the main point that underscores all this prohibition and the reasoning behind it is this idea that the use of marijuana is immoral and dangerous, and it's society's best interest to stop it. And it's something I categorically reject. In fact, I'm quite the opposite. I think if more people were using marijuana instead of other drugs in our society, this world would be a whole lot better place. Let's see. I count myself as lucky because I started marijuana much later than I'm finding a lot of people did. I was 22 years old before I even saw marijuana in my life. Now, I come from rural Idaho, so there wasn't a whole lot of a marijuana scene or anything. I guess the kids behind the shop class in the parking lot maybe, but I was never part of that. I was an honor student. I unfortunately, though, had started drinking alcohol at age 16. And if I had it to do over again, I would switch those 2 ages. I would have started cannabis at 16 and alcohol at 22, because as I found out, alcohol in that 6 years that I was, a major binge drinking teenage young man type alcoholic, it had enormous devastating effects on my life, loss of jobs, dropping out of college, and so forth. As I dropped out of college and I was about 21, 22 years old. I was playing music professionally. And as I was on tour, I was up in a resort in Idaho, McCall, Idaho, with the band. And after the show, one of the guitar players had pulled out a joint. And my first thought was, oh my God, I'm in a band with people that do drugs. These guys do drugs. And they passed the joint around, and I passed it up the first couple, no thank you, no thank you. And I was kind of surprised, because when I said no thank you, I was a little scared to say it with, the dreaded peer pressure would happen. Oh, come on, what are you? Come on, be a man, something like that.
Yeah, more for
that didn't happen. They didn't care. They're like, oh, okay. And then they passed it on, they kept smoking. And after 2 or 3 times around the circle, I went, well, they don't look like they're going to murder people with an axe. They don't seem to be going crazy and psychotic. Maybe I'll try this. And so they passed the joint to me, and I tried the joint. And then the first thought that raced through my mind was, This is drugs?
That's what I
Really?
did.
This is what you were all telling me, in DARE classes and saying throughout school, and the warnings of fried eggs and your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
This is what you were worried about. This was the problem. Not the alcohol that made me puke the night before. Not the alcohol that led to me, getting in fights and sleeping with women of questionable repute. This is what you had the problem with? And from that moment on, my drinking has pretty much stopped, and my cannabis consumption has pretty much continued, and my life is a whole lot better for it.
And you know what? Good for you.
And,
that's kind of like my story.
Joe was applauding in the control room.
Yeah. No, that's kind of like my story too, Russ. I grew up, it was around me too, and but I didn't want anything to do with it. I was an athlete, okay? So I just did my own thing. But what athletes do? A lot of? They drink.
Oh, yeah.
After the competition or whatever. So I did the same thing you did, and I wasn't a very good drinker. As a matter of fact, I left my dad's gas tank to the car at the bottom of the driveway one time coming home, okay? So I joined, and then when I went into military, the same thing kind of happened. It wasn't a band, but it was, military guys, and they were doing drugs. I was like, oh, my God. And I tried it. I didn't like it, really. My first time didn't really do much, so I stayed away for a while. And then it happened again maybe a year later. Me and my wife, we were in White Sands Missile Range, and I said, oh, let's try it and see what happens to our sex life. Well, it didn't really do what I thought there either. But what it did do was made me much calmer as a person. And so that was, and I stopped again. I didn't do it again for years, and then it became what I chose to do. Instead of all the other stuff. And I work at a local hospital here, and you brought up a good point. What I've seen there has been unbelievable when it comes to alcohol and prescription drugs. When people come in OD'd, most of them are on either a prescribed drug or alcohol. Very few come into this small town hospital on an illegal drug. Well, I happened to ask the doctors one time what we would do if we had somebody come in who was overdosed on marijuana. Well, of course, they kind of said, well, you can't really be on marijuana. There's nothing we can do medically because it doesn't happen. So we're treating all these people come in with alcohol problems, and most of the kids, most of the treated people that come into our hospital for the alcohol poisoning, 6 of them were under the age of 17, okay? So, that was another thing that formed what I'm doing now. As a policymaker in the state of Vermont and as in the town of Brattleboro at one point, I found that when it came to our law enforcement folks, the people on the street could care less about marijuana. They would preferably go to you and me and talk to us than they would the drunk. Okay, when they go to a bar, they're more worried about the person who was drinking than they are the person who was smoking. It's the higher ups because of the money that they get to keep their. We have a group here that Vida loves. They're our Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition that are spending tax dollars, I believe, to try and tell people to look out for marijuana and other things too. But right now they're mostly on marijuana, and we got people dying left and right from alcohol.
And that group it's just like all the other preventionist and prohibitionist groups.
They go on fear.
They have a campaign called the Blunt Truth. So they have the audacity to steal one of our terminology words and use it in their messaging, which is not really, they make some good points, but at the same time, they're not really on the mark. It's clear that they have a 100% bias against marijuana. It's not balanced at all. And they're very heavily moneyed. So, we do the best we can with a little bit of support that we have.
Yeah.
So.
Well, here's the blunt truth. Blunts have tobacco in them, and tobacco can be harmful to your health.
That's exactly right. Matter of fact, when you read the thing, it tells you might die from this product.
You know, it's been so long since, but that is right. A blunt is a cigarette that's been partially emptied.
That's right.
Stuffing marijuana into the cigarette paper, and that's a blunt.
That's right.
Or sometimes the use of a tobacco leaf like a cigar filled with just marijuana, but you still have the tobacco leaf.
But you still have the tobacco. That's very interesting. Well, if I could jump in just for a moment and give my background, I'll be brief on this because we really want to hear much more of what you have to say, Russ. But unlike you two, I started smoking. I had my first taste of marijuana in 1967, and when I was 17 years old in Los Angeles. And so that summer was the first summer of this called the Summer of Love, and I went to the first Love-In in Griffith Park in Los Angeles. And in those days, you could walk through the park smoking a joint, and the cops would walk along swinging their sticks. Nobody chased. You know, you had no sense of a battle the way that you have now. It was a much more of a peaceful environment. And so by going through this through the 60s, I think it helped me to carry. I mean, look at me. I mean, you know,
You kept your hair better than I did, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, you know, of course that's genetics. I do nothing. I'm lazy and I don't exercise. But but I am very mentally active. And it's not that I haven't smoked marijuana. I've found marijuana to be probably one of the most delightful things that's ever happened to me in my life. And unlike Daryl, I consider marijuana to be an explicit aphrodisiac.
Well, you know, Vita, we do have something in common. You first smoked a joint at a Love-In in 1967, and I believe I'm the result of joint smoking at a Love-In in 1967.
All right.
He's younger than we are.
Well, are you impaired in any way now? I mean, did you suffer? You know,
brain damage before you were born?
Or before you were born? I mean, did you not complete school successfully? Tell us about
my dad was a professional musician. He played drums on the country circuit a couple times with Willie Nelson, but mostly with B-level country artists like David Frizzell, Shelley West, Orville Couch, Farron Young. Nobody probably knows these names, but anyway, I grew up on the road. The bass drum case was my playpen. They'd put a blanket in the bottom of the bass drum case, and I'd sleep through the rehearsals. My dad was a full alcoholic speed freak and also smoked a lot of weed. My mom smoked a lot of weed at the time. And how did that affect my cognitive development? Well, when I was age 5, they kicked me out of kindergarten after 3 weeks because I was too smart for the kindergarten. They put me ahead to 1st grade. By the time I'd reached 5th grade, they wanted to promote me ahead to 7th grade because I was too smart for 5th grade at the time. But I stayed in the grades, maintained honor society all through junior high and high school, was on...
What happened? We have a text. We have a tech thing.
Took over and everything went to hell.
We have a tech thing. What happened there, Joe?
I don't know. He's moving around a lot. It could be his side.
Okay.
Was that me? I'm so sorry.
That's okay. But you were saying that you were an honor student.
Oh, yeah. I was an honor student throughout junior high and high school. I was in senior, I was in drama, speech, and debate. I was well known as a strong speaker. I'd win awards at the different competitions that we would have. So, no, I don't see that my parents' use of marijuana or any other drugs, for that matter, really affected my development whatsoever. What affected me mostly was at age 16 starting to drink alcohol.
Right. And that's what affected my parents most. Okay? It didn't affect me, their drinking, but it did affect them in their older, as they got older. So
I was fortunate that my father, when I was age 12, my father went through recovery, went to a detox and quit drugs and alcohol. He's been sober ever since. He even went back to school and became a drug and alcohol counselor. Wow. So I've seen both sides of this issue. I've seen what addiction does to families and how it can hurt people. And I've seen the other side, how people can recover and how rehabilitation can actually work. And one thing my father and I both agree on is none of that applies to marijuana.
Well, that's the thing we're trying to do is, we're not sitting here telling everybody to go out and get stoned, okay?
No.
We just want to be, if that's what you choose to do, you should have that legal right without having to worry. And I tell you, I wish more people that have come up to me secretively, you know, and said, "Hey, I love what you're doing." If they all actually would come out and say that on our show, I think this would change so fast it's unbelievable. Because I'm talking about people in very high places, and I don't want to give anything away by naming some of them. But I mean, it's not what you read in the paper, you know, the riffraff down the road. No, no, these are all very professional people that go home at night and have to sneak.
Yeah,
Well,
it's that my neighbor hates pot paradox. We
Yes.
think that everybody else thinks we would be bad if we said something.
Yeah.
When in truth, they would probably celebrate us saying something about it. I know I've gotten nothing but compliments for, you know, being so bold and honest about my marijuana use.
It's been an unbelievable eye-opener for me. Now, there's still a few people out there, and a couple that are probably don't discuss it with me anymore and think I just stink, but that's fine. I got no problem with that.
Let me give you some numbers on this, because it's one of the points that I always make when I'm out on the road speaking about this issue, is how politically impotent we are as a group, as cannabis consumers, mostly because of that being in the closet. But remember, in the ballot booth, you know, nobody knows, right?
Right.
Say whatever you like. But check this out. In America today, and this is according to the National Surveys on Drug Use and Health, which is a government pollster asking you whether or not you break state and federal laws on a regular basis. So the numbers may be low, okay? But here's the numbers that the government uses from the National Survey of Drug Use and Health. 11.2% of Americans age 18 and older will consume cannabis at least once this year. And that works out to 25 million or so adult cannabis consumers over the age of 18 in this country, which means there are more tokers than Texans. We are a bigger group than the state of Texas. There are more Americans who will smoke pot this year than there are Hispanic males in this country. And we're always told what a great demographic that is, a big voting demographic. If we look at issue lobbies in this country, you think of the lobbies like NARAL, Pro-Choice America, the ACLU, the NAACP, American Medical Association, PETA. I could put together the top 10 issue lobbies. There are more of us than them combined. The National Rifle Association is the biggest lobby with about 4 million people involved in it. There are 15 million people in America that will smoke pot this month. Monthly marijuana smokers. There's more pot smokers that will smoke this month than there are union workers in this country. We are a huge group if only we would just realize it.
Well, that's why we're trying to do. We do realize it. And when you go out there and talk, we realize it because people actually come to us and say something. So that's why we know. And that is what we're trying to do here, is we realize there's a lot of us out here. We're taking kind of baby steps. Vita wishes we were moving a little quicker, so do I, but I understand the political process. It takes forever. So we have to really make sure we don't go take one step forward, two back. But the point that we're trying to do is make us into a voting bloc just here in the state of Vermont. As you know, our governor is for the decriminalization of marijuana. But we want to kind of, he said it, and he came and he was one of our featured speakers before he was elected as governor at a forum up in Burlington, and he said it there too. But the thing is to keep his feet to the fire, we have to make sure that we have a block of people that will say, okay, Governor, we've given you a couple years to do your thing. It's time now to talk to us and act. And we need to make the legislature act. Because I know, as a former member, a lot of the folks up there wouldn't have a problem with decriminalization of marijuana. It's just that it's still a Republican roadblock.
And you have the usual misinformation that goes along. You know, the speaker, for instance, speaker of our house here, one of his objections was that it would send the wrong message to young people by decriminalizing marijuana. Well, you know what? That's an old and tired message. It's certainly not true. And what really irks me is that they can say that type of thing, and they don't need to back it up. All they have to say is it sends a wrong message to young people, and leave it alone. But if you were to press them on it, they can give you no substantiation.
Well, here's, this is my domain. I work in talk radio, and a lot of times you've only got 6 seconds to get someone's attention. So the 6-second answer to if we legalized marijuana, it would send the wrong message to the children. The 6-second answer is, what would happen if we legalized tobacco? What message would that send to the children?
Yeah.
And they will say, well, tobacco's already legal. Yes, precisely. Tobacco's already legal, and in the 35 years since 1976, the use of tobacco amongst 12th graders has dropped from 75% to 43%. We didn't lock up a single person. We didn't bust down anyone's doors. We didn't eradicate any tobacco fields to make that happen. We used education. We used strict carding of minors to keep them away from tobacco, and we told them the truth about what tobacco can do to their health, and we've reduced it by 42% in this country. Why can't that work with cannabis?
Oh, it can.
Right.
And that's the way I was
You and
approaching
me
this.
know it can.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's the thing, is there's no argument that a prohibitionist can give you that is not also an argument to ban alcohol or tobacco.
That's right, and it goes across the board like that, which is why when marijuana is singled out, we really want to stand up and try to counterpoint that. There's no reason to really distinguish marijuana that greatly from alcohol. Now, I do know that marijuana people have differing views about what to do with marijuana. Some people want to make it totally legal where they can grow it themselves. Other people want marijuana available through the alcohol model, where an adult can buy it through the same way, a channel the way you would alcohol. Now, that's part of our complexity as a group also. Since
Yes.
not everyone agrees with the alcohol model, can we as a group make a decision about that?
I think we can if we center around what the real issue is not, because that gets into the issues of how marijuana should be legal, and if we bring it back to if marijuana should be legal, or turn it around. I think the successful way to do this is to turn it around and to not say, how should we legalize marijuana, or why should marijuana be legal? We should go with, why should we continue prohibition? And just, focus on stop locking people up. Let's not worry about the sales of it. Let's not worry about who can grow it, where it can be grown. Let's start with marijuana is legal to possess. Period, right? Once marijuana is legal to possess, then all the arguments we go from that point forward from a platform of it being legal. And all those people who couldn't come out previously to help support us now can, because it's legal, and say, okay, now we should talk about how it's sold. Now we should talk about how it's grown. Now we should talk about how it's regulated. But we can't make that step until we've made the step of stop putting people in cages for it.
Well, I'm not sure, and that's a good point, to incorporate that into the political process and then present that to legislators. That's also a hard ball game there, because they're going to say to you, well, how can we make something legal if you don't let us regulate it or control it in some fashion? So it's that, but I like the sentiment which says that let's see this plant as a valuable plant, and I guess the word decriminalization comes in here, where possessing it is not a criminal act. It doesn't involve criminal intent. Oftentimes, it's not criminal use, and therefore it shouldn't be criminal in the first place. And so where we go with that, it's a tough call, because standing before you, me, Normal, MPP, and all of the other groups are the legislatures.
Mm-hmm. And it's all based on this idea, and it's beyond marijuana, really. It's really starts to get into the idea of cognitive liberty. We see this in their attempts to, and their successful attempts to ban the synthetic cannabinoid analogs, the JWH018s, the spice, the K2, the fake incense that's sold as pot. It's not illegal because it's pot. It's illegal because it gets you high. And that's at the root of all of this. Is it government's business? Is it society's business to stop me from what I'm doing in my own head? Now, absent any causing any harm to others, of course.
That's right.
But I feel, behind closed doors in my home, that's, if life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness doesn't include smoking a joint on your porch, then the Declaration of Independence wasn't worth the hemp it was written on.
That's right.
Terence McKenna saying there. But and now, I don't know if you guys went over this on, this is just breaking news. Yesterday, the Supreme Court decided in this case called Kentucky v. King that if they smell pot and hear noises, they can break down your door.
They can just break it down.
That's crazy.
That's
That is crazy.
And, well, of course, look where the court came from. So, I would be surprised. Now, Justice Ginsburg, I think it was the dissenting voice in that. And where she made it clear then that it would give the police undue powers to break down. See, once you start to break down my door process, really, where does it end? And I'm glad that
it's going to end in a lawsuit because somebody will sue the crap out of the government.
Well, and that's going to add years to what we really need to do. So
now, well, the lesson of Kentucky v. King is if you're smoking pot and the cops knock on your door, be very, very quiet.
And shut the windows.
But this goes back, we were talking earlier about not being ashamed of being a marijuana legalizer. And because one of the things I get is, oh, why are you so concentrating on pot? There's global warming, there's, torture, there's war. Aren't there more important things to concentrate on? But I challenge anyone to think about it and try to find another issue that touches so many of our civil liberties as does the war on marijuana.
That's right.
First Amendment, well, let's talk about religious use by Rastafarians. Second Amendment, well, let's talk about how all your punishments in drug crimes are doubled when you're in possession of even a legal firearm. Third Amendment, keeping a soldier quartered in our home. Well, what is a drug test but a government agent making sure that I'm not doing something I shouldn't do, quartered in my home? Fourth Amendment, don't get me started. Fifth Amendment, testifying against yourself. Again, what is a drug test but a testimony against yourself? We could go through them all. 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 14th, 13th. So many of our rights. We start talking about felon disenfranchisement, and I want to give you guys kudos in Vermont because I just learned this. I've been doing some new research on this. Vermont and Maine are the only states from which felons can vote from prison.
That's right.
In every other state in this country, if you're in prison as a felon, you can't vote. And in most states, you can't vote when you're on parole or probation. And on 12 states, you can't vote even after your parole and probation is done. You have to petition to get your voting rights back. This has disenfranchised 2.2% of voting age Americans. It's disenfranchised 8% of African Americans. And because so many of these felonies are drug arrests and drug crimes, how do you change the law when the people who would most want to change the law can't vote for that? There's so much.
Well, at least we know that it was intentional then, so that it's not an accident that's happening. In fact,
there are currently more African American men in prison or disenfranchised than there were during the Jim Crow era in this country. Yeah. There's a fantastic book by Michelle Alexander called "The War on Drugs is the New Jim Crow." Outlines all of this, and it's just amazing. In the state of Florida right now, which is the worst state, in Florida, you have to have, if you have over 20 grams of marijuana, it's a felony. Now, 20 grams is about 2/3 of an ounce, right? A little more than half an ounce there. That much is a felony. And then once you get that felony, you can't vote while you're in prison, while you're on parole, while you're on probation. And then for 5 to 7 years after you've fulfilled all your sentence, after that 5 to 7 year waiting period, then you can apply to a clemency board to get your right to vote back. This has disenfranchised 9% of Floridians, 18.8% of African American Floridians. This is what the war on drugs does. It's the exception to the Bill of Rights. It's what the tyrannical governments have always wanted, to be able to get around our Bill of Rights, and we've handed it to them on a silver platter.
Yep.
Okay, you know what? I think for some of our time, I think we have about 10 minutes left. Is that right, Joe?
Yep.
Since a good part of our upcoming program, Daryl and I did a personal use show back last fall, but really we're thinking of you as kicking it off. And we have next month we have one of our locals here who will also do a past personal use show. His name is Larry Block, and he's the owner of Save the Corporations from Themselves,
which is our good hemp store.
He reacted the same way everybody does as soon as you say that. And,
I like that.
And he's
a great name.
And Larry Block is also also the former owner of Wetlands in New York, I think in the 70s and 80s, a very
90s.
hot, and 90s, a very hot disco club in Manhattan. And so, since we know that by 22, you had begun smoking. Would you characterize your smoking after that point as being regular? Was it something that rolled in like suddenly one day you're smoking every day, or it took time? What about that issue?
Well, I would say that within the first year, I became a fairly regular cannabis consumer. I was living with bandmates at the time, playing music, and somebody always had a joint. We would, smoke at rehearsal, So there was I would say fairly constant, at least a weekly toker. And as I've gotten older, it's become more of a daily toker. I find my use is really, well, I don't know. Some people might call it medical for mental health reasons. All I know is my life is better, my head feels better, my mind feels better when I'm using cannabis than when I'm not using cannabis. And again,
Bingo.
since I don't see myself committing any crime by doing this. I see myself as treating myself. This is one of the things we think about in medical marijuana states is moving from beyond this idea of symptom management into just overall wellness. And marijuana makes me feel well. I don't see a problem with that.
Yep, I'm with you on that, Russ.
We are definitely with you on that. Can I just add something else about my personal use, just to sort of jump in this for a second again? By my late 20s, 29, I knew I was smoking marijuana a lot, and my doctor knew that I was smoking, and he said to me, I want you to tell me how much you're smoking. And I told him, and he said, I think you're smoking too much. He said, you know what, I want you to come and see. This is my doctor, my personal doctor. I had him for 25 years. He said, I want you to come to me every 3 months, and I want you to tell me how much you're smoking, and we'll discuss it. So over a year or so, I went there, and I would tell him how much I'm smoking. You're still smoking too much. And then finally, maybe a year or so later, he said, I think everything's fine, you're okay. Now, when I say too much, I mean in those days, we're talking like 1979 here. I'm smoking like 6, 7 times, 8 times a day. Now, I'm not saying that's a lot even, but it's an individual. Look, and say this. I mean, look, I know potheads can smoke 15 times a day. That's fine. It's like if I want to drink 4 glasses of wine before I go to bed, that's my thing. If I want to drink 14 cups of coffee, that's my thing. And so it was a little too much for me. So, and the point is that I didn't have to go to jail or rehab, or all I did was had a simple conversation with my own physician, and it worked beautifully. And for most of my life, I would describe myself as a moderate marijuana smoker. Now, it's true that I've taken a liking to sherry, and alcohol does not harm me. I also have a history of not letting anything control me. I'm the one that stays in. I don't care what it is, sex, drugs, or anything else. And I think most people...
You're way ahead of the ball game, then.
Well, no, I think, and this, Russ, maybe you can help us with this. I think most humans are really that way, in that no matter how much you smoke personally, you don't consider yourself a drug addict, do you?
Right. Well, I think what happens here is, again, it's that issue of being forced underground, being forced into the closet, that causes the general public to not really have a good frame of reference when we talk about marijuana and marijuana legalization. If someone was picking up a 6-pack of beer at a convenience store, your first thought when you see them wouldn't be, oh man, a drunk, look at that drunk, he's
right.
such a drunk.
That's a good point.
No, because we have so many references of people using alcohol responsibly. We have so many things. We think of beer gardens and bars and restaurants and dinners, and we have all sorts of places where the use of alcohol is normative. It's very normal to use our acronym, and that's what we try to do with normal, is to, again, show that this is just a normal thing. There is nothing crazy or weird about it. When you say something like, well, I'll use my own personal example. I smoke marijuana probably between 6 and 10 times a day. But when you hear that, when an average person hears that, they go, oh my God, Russ Belville's getting blitzed, bong stoned 6 to 10 times a day. No, I'm not. When I come down here to the office and start to work, I'll start to write something. I'll be looking at it. There might be the end of a joint sitting there. I'll take a puff off it. I'll sit it down. I'm not getting rip-roaring high. I'm maybe taking a little edge off, maybe just relaxing a tiny bit. I'll work for a little while. I'll do my show. After the show, maybe I smoke a little more of that joint. So sure, maybe I've smoked 6 to 10 times a day, but over the span of that day, maybe I've smoked 1 joint, maybe 2. And again, you develop a tolerance as you get older, as you've done it more. At this point, to me, smoking marijuana feels no more frequent, odd, or crazy than having a cup of coffee in the morning and having maybe one with lunch, and maybe you have a Coke at the end of the day. My caffeine use and my marijuana use almost seem as big a deal to me.
See, for me, I don't do caffeine, I don't do alcohol, I don't do anything. But when I start getting on edge and I start feeling, because I'm just that type of guy, okay? Things I start going and my life is fast and things are happening quick and I'm very busy. I need that, whew, and that's it, okay? I'm the same as you. And I mean, it just makes me, now you can talk to me. Matter of fact, my kids would tell me, please go watch Sports Center now, Dad. Okay, because that was the joke. And my kids have been brought up, they don't smoke. They don't smoke. And I've told every one of my kids, when you're of age, when you're 21, please don't drink, smoke pot. Because somebody who works at a hospital, I've been there 25 years, okay? And what I like to tell the folks around, you need to spend a weekend in your local hospital, wherever you live, all right? Don't worry about me and my pot. Worry about the guy who just beat the crap out of his wife because he came home and had a rough day and got drunk, or his kids. The stuff I see from alcohol abuse is unbelievable. Leave us alone, go there, and let's see how we all do. Because I'm telling you, and that's why I'm out talking about it now. I'm 55 years old. I'm comfortable. Okay?
Yeah.
If somebody wants to throw me in jail now and spend the $52,000 a year, I'm right here. Come get me. Take me away, take a productive person out of the society and lock me up. Go ahead. If you want to use me to prove that, then come get me. Because I am sick and tired of this crap, and I still have the same respect amongst most of the people that I deal with as I did before I came out and said this stuff. And for me, it's what you see every day around us is more of a problem than what people aren't seeing every day, and because we're all hiding. Well, and the commercials about the terrorists. Here's one that really kills me. You know, back in the old days, the terrorists. You know, if we legalize this stuff, we'd be saving lives in Mexico.
Absolutely.
Okay? And most of the people, this is another one, Russ. Most of the people that I know are not consuming foreign drugs. Most of the people I know in this state are growing. Okay? Most of us are taking care of it ourselves now, and it's probably one of the biggest hobbies going in this country.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and that's what's maddening is when you research. We've done many things in America. We've outsourced our drug war violence, and it's been outsourced to Mexico. And it's such a shame to see this going on in this country. It's being torn apart in Ciudad Juarez, which is
I lived
just
there
south
years ago.
Yeah, just south of El Paso. There were 2,700 murders last year. In the state of California, the entire state, there were 1,900 murders. So 38% more murders in one city in Mexico than the entire state of California. That's a bloodbath. That's crazy. 34,550 deaths over the reign of the current president in Mexico since 2007, I believe that is. So 4 years, 34,000 deaths. We're approaching Vietnam War levels of deaths in Mexico, just south of us, and hardly anyone in America even considers it unless they're living in a border state right now.
Yeah. Okay, Russ, we have about a minute or so. Is there any way you'd like to wrap up for our viewers?
Sure. I'd like to encourage everyone to check us out on Normal Show Live every weekday at 4 p.m. Eastern at live.normal.org. I talk about this stuff every day. We take live calls. It'd be great to hear from people on the East Coast. And check us out sometime. I'd love to hear from you. And check our blog at stash.normal.org.
Excellent. Hey, Russ, thanks an awful lot for all the work you're doing on this and probably whatever else you're doing out there.
Thank
we
you.
thank you. Thanks an awful lot for spending some time with us and helping people in Vermont understand what's going on. Vida, close us out.
It's great to have you, Russ.
All
Perhaps
right.
maybe we'll have you back later in the year or something, but
Sounds good to
we'll
me.
make sure that
Thank
we
you so
stay
much,
in
and
touch.
take care of each other, Tokers.
You betcha.
Do the same, Russ. Thanks a lot. This has been the Marijuana Resolve Show. And this particular episode, our guest Russ Belleville, from Normal, and we are now ready to conclude our program.
Yep, so for all you folks out there that have been watching it, and you folks up there in Burlington too, hey, get a hold of us. Check us out on Marijuana Resolve. It's right down there. We'll try and get our web,
And make sure
contact information is going to come across anyway.
and make sure you look into Normal. They are vital to what we're doing.
They have more information than, I mean, there's got to be stuff coming out on a daily basis from them constantly, because I get a ton of emails from you guys, and I thank you because it's all very interesting,
right.
and it helps get rid of a lot of the myths out there.
Right.
So listen, again, for Vida, for our guest,